I'm 100%. This is, yeah? We're going in here 100%. I'm going into this fight 100% Conor McGregor, not 92. 100% Conor McGregor. So it has to be really meticulous. We were right there with the last one. As a unit, we do it, right? Let's go, let's go.
Much more interesting conversation. Let's say you're in charge. Let's say you're in charge of matchmaking and you believe that Conor moves the needle. Your entire business plan is to have Conor McGregor, and I hear people do this all the time. I've heard so many people say they should be a matchmaker for the UFC, and I'll really lay it on me. What would you do different? And 100% of the time, they'll say, I would put Conor McGregor, and it's like, let me just stop you right there. You don't have to be a good salesman to move the Ferrari. I want to talk to a salesman that can get the Volvo off the lot. But I hear people do this all the time. If I was in charge, I would put McGregor with... Okay, great.
The mere mention of Conor McGregor instantly ignites a firestorm across the mixed martial arts landscape. The question of whether the notorious Irishman will face another defeat sparks intense debate among everyone from dedicated analysts to passionate armchair matchmakers, all eager to propose their ideal opponent. This segment aptly captures the widespread belief that everyone has a definitive plan for McGregor's next move. However, the true scenario extends far beyond simply selecting an opponent. The repercussions are immense, impacting not only McGregor's legendary status but also the UFC's entire financial strategy. As the sport's unparalleled draw, his return represents more than a single bout. It symbolizes a pivotal moment for the sport itself. Let's delve deeper into this overarching narrative.
But let's stay with that theme. How are you going to get him twice? And really think about that. Do you believe that Conor is more likely to get motivated and come back and fight a second time if he wins his return fight, which is next, or if he loses? That really is the question. Ronda Rousey just did an interview. She talked about, I'm never going to fight again when this is done, but she made it very clear that she believes that she's going to beat Gina Carano. In fact, within the statement, Ronda even said, well, I mean, I suppose I could fight again if something crazy happens with me and Gina, and all she means by crazy is that she gets beat.
The strategic intricacies behind the scenes are truly a high-stakes game. Dana White and the UFC's leadership aren't merely focused on the immediate pay-per-view numbers. Their long-term vision involves sustaining the immense momentum of the McGregor brand. Drawing a parallel to Ronda Rousey's career, a compelling psychological dilemma emerges for elite athletes. While every fighter yearns for triumphant departure, a decisive victory can paradoxically diminish the motivation for future battles. If McGregor delivers a flawless, dominant performance and chooses to conclude his career on such a high note, what genuine incentive remains to endure another arduous training camp, another grueling weight cut, and the ever-present threat of a devastating loss? Opinions within the fighting community are divided, with some suggesting a powerful win could fuel further ambition, while others contend it offers the ultimate exit strategy. What's your take?
The ego for more. Others argue it provides the perfect exit. What do you all think?
So getting into the psychological side of Conor McGregor, do you believe if you need to get him to fight twice, are you smarter to have him win or lose his return fight? I know there's nothing you can do to control that. I'm just asking, what do you think? Does he seem like the kind of guy that if he gets all the power back and he has this wonderful performance and that's the way that he can be remembered and that's the way that he can ride off in the sunset? Do you believe that he's going to risk all of that and come back one more time when it's not for a title, it's not for a ranking, it's not at his weight class, and he doesn't need the money?
This particular discussion zeroes in on the distinctive driving forces behind Conor McGregor's actions. Unlike the vast majority of his peers, financial gain no longer serves as his primary incentive, as he has already amassed substantial wealth. Consequently, when McGregor articulates his desire for legacy and lasting recognition, the prospect of an impeccable, victorious departure becomes remarkably attractive. Why would he gamble a flawless showing, a triumphant come, against a determined opponent for an encounter devoid of title implications, ranking advancement, or any pressing financial need? This is a question the UFC fanbase constantly scrutinizes. Is his motivation a profound passion for combat, a relentless competitive spirit, or is the intoxicating pull of the limelight and the thunderous acclaim of the audience simply irresistible? Should he deliver an exceptional performance, retiring at that peak could very well be his most sagacious decision.
If he does perform wonderfully, stepping away might be the smartest move he ever makes.
Very tough to know what motivates and drives Conor McGregor. But I'm hearing talk, and this talk is from very good sources, that Conor is going to come back against Max. There's no part of me that believes that's true, aside from the people that are telling me it's true. I have people that would know, people whose job it is to know, and they're telling me it's going to be against Max. But therein lies a little bit more of the problem. If Conor was to come back against Max and things not go Conor's way, right? And Conor has been out for over a...
With McGregor's absence now stretching beyond 1,000 days, a vital observation surfaces. His true incentives are notoriously elusive. However, the atmosphere shifts dramatically when the whispers of a potential Max Holloway clash emerge, sparking a collective astonishment. The notion of blessed Holloway facing a returning McGregor after such an extended layoff and a severe injury genuinely puzzles even the most dedicated purists of the sport. While the matchup undoubtedly carries massive star power, it appears to be a high-stakes gamble with minimal tangible payoff for McGregor, especially considering Holloway's peak performance level. The MMA community is divided, interpreting this prospective fight either as an exceptionally courageous, perhaps even reckless decision by McGregor, or as a shrewd maneuver by the UFC designed to set up a compelling redemption story following an anticipated defeat.
Narrative of redemption for an inevitable loss.
He's coming off a catastrophic injury, and he would be fighting at 170 pounds, of which he has never held a ranking. And he's fighting a guy who in the last 2 years fought for world championships, a BMF belt of which he won, and a defense of a BMF belt of which he lost. So Max's last 3 fights have all been title fights versus a guy who's been out for over 1,000 days. I mean, you understand where it is very unlikely that Conor is going to win. So now if you're going to get him beat up, you get him beat up by a guy that he once was better than, and we know that because they competed, and you do it at a weight class.
This situation transcends a simple comeback. It concerns an athlete returning from a potentially career-defining injury, making a leap across weight classes to confront Max Holloway, who is currently in his absolute prime and actively contending for championships and BMF titles. The disparity in their recent activity couldn't be more pronounced. Holloway has consistently refined his formidable skills against top-tier competition, while McGregor has remained inactive. The undeniable reality of combat sports is that ring rust is a potent factor, and against an opponent of Holloway's caliber, it could prove disastrous. The consensus within the community is that McGregor would face an extraordinarily challenging ascent. Should these rumors materialize, the probabilities would be significantly against him, rendering any triumph legendary, yet any defeat strikingly foreseeable.
Any victory legendary, but any loss perhaps devastatingly predictable.
That neither one of them belongs in. Like, there's really not any room for shelter on that. There's really no coverage for you to hide behind. Where you go, oh yeah, but this is a young guy, this is an up-and-comer. I had the courage and stepped in there with a guy that was 10 years younger than me. I stepped out of my weight class that I've never competed in. I went 5 rounds with a number 8 guy. Like, there's no coverage. But do you believe that embarrassment, is that what we should call it? Would that cause an embarrassment to Conor? And that embarrassment would thus motivate him to go out there a second time?
The concept of no coverage, as highlighted by the speaker, becomes vitally important here. Consider the media narrative if Conor McGregor were to suffer a defeat against Max Holloway at 170 pounds. There would be no convenient explanations available, no young lion excuse, nor the defense of fighting in an unfamiliar weight class, as 170 pounds is McGregor's preferred division. Furthermore, Max, a former featherweight, is not a natural welterweight, making the optics even more severe. This raises a crucial question. Would such a significant and public humiliation, that profound embarrassment, reignite McGregor's fighting spirit for a rematch? Or would it simply mark a definitive, humbling conclusion leading to permanent retirement? The MMA community observes keenly, wondering whether such a blow would reignite the notorious one's fire or extinguish his competitive flame indefinitely.
Eager to see if embarrassment fuels the notorious one or extinguishes his flame for good.
It's a very tough scenario to imagine Conor's going to make that walk twice, not to mention his most compelling opponents aren't in the UFC. Like, Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz is still the biggest fight. But Conor McGregor versus Mike Perry has some real legs to it. Conor McGregor versus George Masvidal is kind of an interesting thing. So none of those are going to happen in Conor's first fight back. So what kind of a result would you need to get in that first fight back, in the return fight? What kind of a result would you have to get that would motivate a rich man to come back and do it?
The speaker's doubt regarding McGregor's willingness to compete a second time resonates broadly within the combat sports community. It's genuinely challenging to envision McGregor stepping into the octagon for another bout, particularly if his initial return doesn't feature one of his most captivating rivals, such as Nate Diaz, or even intriguing matchups against fighters like Mike Perry or Jorge Masvidal. Thus, if his comeback fight isn't against an opponent who offers either significant legacy enhancement or a massive payday, what specific outcome would compel him to fight again? For a man who already possesses everything, whether a spectacular first-round knockout or a contentious decision victory, the incentive to repeat such a performance after his first return remains an enigma that continues to perplex the entire MMA world.
It's a puzzle that keeps the entire MMA world guessing.
I think that's a very hard question to answer. If Conor comes out and he was to get a first-round knockout, that would just be an amazing thing, right? I don't think we could script anything better than that if you're a Conor supporter. But do you think that would make him then want to go back into a training camp, beat the scale, deal with the commission, deal with the drug testers, make the walk, and risk it all one more time? Or what if we looked at the other side of the coin? Conor gets knocked out in the first round. Do you think that would drive him, motivate him, encourage him to get out there and do it quickly? But what do you think the promotion's going to say? The promotion's now going to say, okay, look, you got cleaned up in less than 5 minutes by a guy who's not even in a weight class that we made up just for you.
This represents the quintessential what-if scenario that thoroughly captivates online discussions. Should Conor McGregor deliver a highlight reel first-round knockout, the global fanbase would undoubtedly erupt. Yet, would such a triumphant moment serve as the ultimate mic drop, perfectly cementing his legendary status and allowing him to retire at the pinnacle of his career? Or would the sheer exhilaration of victory and the deafening roar of the crowd prove so addictive that he would relentlessly pursue another fight? Conversely, if he were to suffer a rapid knockout, a segment of the community speculates that such a defeat might ignite his warrior's resolve, driving him towards immediate redemption. However, as the speaker astutely observes, how would the promotion effectively market a swift rematch following a definitive loss, especially one where he was decisively beaten in a weight class not considered his natural division? This presents an absolute marketing catastrophe for the UFC.
Nightmare for the UFC.
And now we're going to run it back, sell out an arena, give you the biggest paycheck for no title implications, for no ranking, for really no reason at all, and it's going to be your last time. I mean, it's a really tough sell. Historically speaking, what would you hang your hat on there? If you were to point to a time in history, who has ever been in that situation? Who ever got to be a main event on their way out the door? Who ever got a favorable fight when it was their last one? Like, on what grounds would you be making that statement? And I think when you think about it from that perspective, you do understand that Conor's next fight is the final fight.
Fundamentally, the UFC operates as a business, and as this segment skillfully illustrates, attempting to promote a non-title, non-ranking rematch after a swift, conclusive defeat, particularly for an already affluent fighter, poses an unparalleled promotional hurdle. Historically, very few athletes approaching retirement, especially those coming off losses, are granted a favorable farewell fight or a coveted main event position. This realistic perspective implies that regardless of McGregor's personal convictions or the aspirations of his fans, his upcoming bout could indeed be his last. The community is currently confronting this stark realization. The twilight of an era might be drawing nearer than many are prepared to acknowledge, and the UFC's strategic choices will undoubtedly mirror this difficult truth. It's a reality that McGregor himself might not yet fully grasp.
Or not. None of us know the future. You know what you would like to happen, or you would think when you talk to the principal in a situation like this that would be the ultimate source, but it's really not. As a matter of fact, the principal in a situation like this is probably the last person. They're probably the most unlikely person to be able to stand back and see this board for what it is. If Conor was to lose his next fight, as good at packaging and branding as the UFC is, do you believe they are good enough that they could...
It's both compelling and sobering to consider that the athlete himself, the central figure in this narrative, might be the last to genuinely comprehend the ultimate trajectory of his own career. With his characteristic boundless confidence and unwavering self-assurance, Conor McGregor likely envisions numerous future contests. However, the UFC, supreme architects of promotion and branding, face an immense challenge should he suffer a defeat. Even with their formidable marketing prowess, could they genuinely sell McGregor in a main event slot after a conclusive loss? The community deliberates on the potential ramifications. A defeat could see him demoted to co-main event status, or even more disheartening, transformed into a gatekeeper, a role entirely unsuited for the sport's biggest superstar. This segment powerfully underscores the harsh commercial truths underpinning all the comeback excitement.
The comeback hype.
In a main event spot again. And by the way, if Conor's to win his next fight, do you believe that next opponent, the final opponent, is going to be favorable in the least, right? Like the one thing that Conor really needs as he's coming up on a decision for who his opponent's going to be. He really needs to sell the idea that he's going to make that walk multiple times. The only way he gets a favorable opponent in this next fight, the only way that the guy is even slightly favorable, which Max Holloway would be very favorable. That's a 145-pounder that's going to go fight at 170. Like, that would be a very...
This succinctly illustrates the intricate strategic maneuvering between Conor McGregor, his camp, and the UFC's matchmakers. Should McGregor triumph in his comeback fight, his subsequent opponent will almost certainly not be an easy one. The UFC will undoubtedly leverage his renewed momentum, propelling him into another high-stakes, challenging contest to maximize pay-per-view revenue. For McGregor to even secure a somewhat advantageous opponent for his return, he must convincingly convey his intention to fight multiple times. The discussion revisits Max Holloway, emphasizing that despite his exceptional striking abilities, he is inherently a 145-pound fighter. This perceived size advantage for McGregor at 170 pounds could make Holloway seem like a more manageable opponent compared to other welterweights. However, this is a misleading assessment when Holloway's elite skill set is fully considered. The MMA community keenly observes these subtle complexities, actively debating the potential pitfalls.
Sees these nuances, debating the potential trapdoor.
But nobody's ever been helped in their final performance. They would have to do a very good job of convincing everybody that this is just a stepping stone, this is just a return, this is the start of something great. Will Conor McGregor fight again? Yes, I believe so. Will he fight twice? No, that I don't believe.
Fight twice? No, I simply don't believe that. This concluding segment delivers a stark, almost somber forecast that resonates deeply throughout the MMA world. Historically, the UFC rarely provides a grand, favorable send-off for departing fighters, particularly not with an advantageous pairing. To gain any perceived benefit in his return bout, McGregor must persuade all stakeholders, the fans, the press, and crucially, the UFC executives, that this comeback merely marks the commencement of a larger journey, a prelude to greater achievements. However, the speaker's final verdict, asserting that while McGregor will indeed fight once more, he will not engage in a second subsequent bout, carries significant weight. It implies that despite the surrounding fanfare, the inherent disorder, and the incessant conjecture, the sun is unequivocally beginning to set on the notorious one's celebrated, polarizing, and utterly memorable career within the octagon. This is a conclusion many loyal fans are still reluctant to embrace.